Today represents a journey. The last few months, we at BDO have been debating the future of our industry, of the profession, and our firm's role in that future. Well before the commencement of lockdown and the challenges of COVID-19, we were grappling with the role we can and must play in the future of the audit profession. Much of this conversation has centered around where we need to be clearer, and with this, what it means for our clients, our regulators, and our staff as a result. Clarity is our way. The word itself is clear, but most critically, it unlocks deeply relevant behaviors and intensely powerful conversations. It takes away the unnecessary. It replaces it with certainty. So while we as a profession need to talk about the need to win back trust, the only way we can do this is by creating certainty. And certainty comes when we are clear. For us, this is an almost dogmatic commitment to change. Not simply lip service to the frustrations in our society, but an active and practical shift in how we create value. This is our Clarity Charter. We are creating a higher standard by which we judge ourselves as BDO, so that we do what we as a profession should always have done. Today's conversation is a robust and engaged effort to begin our Clarity journey. It is a relevant and critical starting point for the question we all have: what does this mean for me?
Let's be clear. Let's say it right and do it right. Let's cut through the noise, say what we mean, and act like we mean it. Clarity isn't the opposite of complexity. Clarity doesn't mean there's only one answer. Clarity isn't a shortcut. Instead, it's a process, a refining of all our thinking and doing, until all that's left is the clearest articulation of who we are and how we work. Clarity is our line in the sand, our non-negotiable, and our clear way forward. Let's be clear.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the BDO Clarity Charter sessions. My name is Macfarlane Moleil. I'm not only humbled, but I'm also truly honored to be your host this afternoon. I'm sure we're going to have lots of fun. So let me say hello to everyone. I'm going to start with all our BDO clients that have joined us from their homes, from their offices, and maybe even some from their cars. But wherever you are, welcome and thank you for being a part of this this afternoon. We've also got BDO staff that are joining us this afternoon. Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are having a good time. And last, but certainly not least, my colleagues in the industry, and those are my friends from media. Guys, please ask a lot of questions. Please make a lot of noise on social media, on Twitter, on the different social media channels. The hashtag is hashtag BDO Clarity Charter. Also remember that if you've got any questions that you would like to ask, any interesting points that you'd like to bring up, we will get to see them and we will then be able to interact with you. We are having a conversation. And we've been having this conversation for quite a while with the producer that this is not another webinar. So before you get that starry-eyed look on your face and think you're going to be staring at the computer the entire afternoon, it's not one of those. You're going to have nice, meaningful, deep conversations about an industry at the moment that is going through a bit of turmoil, an industry that needs to have a bit of introspection, an industry that has lost a lot of trust, not only from clients, but from the general public. When you look at what has been happening with state-owned enterprises, when you look at what has been happening within municipalities and even within the private sector, it is time for some sense of direction, for some sort of paradigm shift so that we look at things much clearer, much better, and as Mark had said earlier on, maybe do things the way that they were supposed to have done. So let's get a bit of clarity, and I can't speak much about it because I've got much smarter people sitting with me here that can give us a bit more about what today is going to be all about. And with me on my left-hand side here is Mark Stewart. He's the CEO for BDO South Africa. Now, he's been with the firm for 35 years. We were laughing with him the other day and saying that I was only 5 years old when he started working. And he's passionate about the growth of BDO, especially its brand and the ability, of course, to institute change within the industry. Some of Mark's achievements have been recognized by his global peers, and this was in 2018. Yes, he received the BDO medal for his contributions towards growing the firm and the efforts he made to secure their recent mergers as well as acquisitions. Sitting next to him, of course, the rose amongst us two thorns here, we've got Tuto Masasa, who's the head of advisory at BDO South Africa, and she's going to be chatting to us a little bit about clarity as a business solution and how it benefits from it. Tuto is the head of BDO Advisory Services, and she's also a qualified chartered accountant with extensive experience established over 15 years working in commerce, assurance, and corporate advisory services. So, Mark, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Macfarlane.
Tuto, thank you so much for joining us as well. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you with us. And as we said, guys, we do appreciate it. If you can please keep communicating with us, we will be seeing it live on the screen. Some of your questions will we then be putting forth as well. And if there's anything that you not have clarity on, we'll definitely make sure that both of these guys here will be able to answer any of that. So before we get into it, Mark, I'm going to start with a really tough question. And I think it's important that, you know, not only for our audience, but for us as well, just to get an understanding that what was the journey that led us to eventually getting to this point where you said, this industry needs clarity?
Macfarlane, as you said in your introduction, our profession has gone through the trenches in the last 3 years or so. And there's been so much effort that's been put into trying to change the position. And there are innumerable forums where people are working hard to make that change. But sadly, every step forward we take, they seem to take 2 steps back. And as a firm, we decided, well, we can't rely on other people. It's got to be something closer to home. It starts with us.
Yes.
And that's really where this whole journey started. And I think it's fair to say that it's not an overnight thing. When I think back to the third quarter of last year when we started talking about it and the effort that's gone into getting us to this point, which is really only the starting point as far as the public goes. But I'd like to think that it's a change for us. It's a change for what we might see in the profession. And if we can make a small contribution to changing what is being experienced out there, then I think we would have done well.
Mark, you could have chosen a whole lot of topics. You could have chosen a whole lot of strategies to deal with the issue and what has been happening within the industry. But you specifically chose clarity. Why now?
Look, I think that it's interesting that we've had a lot of noise in the last couple of weeks about some of the failings of the profession. It's just totally coincidental that we find ourselves launching this at a time when there's a heightened awareness in the profession or about the profession. But one has to start somewhere. And I think that we as a firm who are influenced by a regulator, influenced by what the public perception is, we needed to hear that. And it was a decision, as I say, which we took towards the end of last year and launching now. I suppose people can say, well, is this not too late? I don't think one can ever be too late. One could always have been earlier. But I'm proud of the fact that we are at least making a stand and stating exactly what we want to achieve out of this program.
That's brilliant. Tuto, I'd just like to bring you in here and, you know, especially from a consulting point of view and dealing with clients, what does this approach mean for them?
Sure. Thanks, Macfarlane, for the question. I think, firstly, you know, just taking a step back into what Mark explained from a Clarity Charter perspective is where has the expectation gap been? You know, and I think particularly when we speak from a consulting perspective, we certainly can, or we hear noises around value for money.
Yes.
You know, our stakeholders basically indicating to us as consultants that they are not feeling that they're getting really value for money. And really this journey for us then, we then putting ourselves out there to then say we seek to hopefully, bridge that gap with our stakeholders in the way that we basically interact and engage with them. And there are a couple of things that, we kind of try to bring it home. And some of those would be clarifying. Maybe I can go back to some of the basic principles of the things that we would try to sort of clarify as we engage our clients and stakeholders as we go along. I mean, we may take it for granted, making sure that we understand and clarify the problem statement. Our consultants, when they do go out there, do they make our clients feel understood and heard?
Something that I think we should also maybe have a look at is that what has led down this path? I mean, when you see the scandals, in many of the instances, it was the relationship that organizations had with clients, and those lines had started getting blurry.
Yeah, certainly, and I think perhaps also profits, kind of getting in the way of what we've got to deliver, chasing profits versus maybe the quality of the type of work that we've got to deliver on. And also intense competition at all costs, and not perhaps maybe not ethical competition. So, and I agree with you to some degree. The lines did get blurred in terms of the relationships between clients and consultants.
Mark, I want to maybe come back to you, and obviously this is looking at the whole clarity strategy as a whole. When you made the decision that this is the route that we want to take and we want to sort of spearhead this as BDO, would you say there was no clarity within the industry in terms of the work that needs to be done and how things are done?
Well, it's very difficult for me to criticize our professional colleagues, and I certainly wouldn't ever do that, because I don't think that any of the firms that we interact with have ethics that are of a lesser standard than us, and I think that the work that has been done by the profession and individuals who have been negatively affected by the publicity is something that we've all drawn on and we can all learn from.
Yes.
So I think that I'm really happy that we are able to learn from each other's mistakes, and we certainly would like to build on that. So I look forward to the interactions post this, because no doubt there will be some questions from colleagues, from the media.
Yes.
And all I'd like to reiterate, it's our effort to try and improve the lot for the entire profession. And the small way in that we're starting, hopefully we'll achieve that. Yeah.
It is a small step. It is also an incredibly brave step. What sort of impact, though, are you hoping to achieve? How are you hoping to move that needle slightly?
I think, as I said, when we internalize it and make it our own, we're about 1,500 odd people in our organization, which is quite a big contributor to the profession that we talk about. And if we can get every one of those individuals to be thinking along the same lines of doing what is right, doing what is clear, and making sure that clients understand what we're trying to achieve, then I think that we can make a difference. Obviously, one hopes to never be involved in any type of scandal that erupts. I don't think that one can be so bold as to say that that's not going to happen, but certainly that's our aspiration, and I'm very aware of the tall poppy syndrome. You stick your neck out, you're likely to get it knocked off. But that doesn't mean one shouldn't try.
Yes.
And it is an aspirational thing that we've embarked on. And as I say, I look forward to all of our staff contributing towards it.
That's incredible. Tutu, I want to ask maybe this, right? With clarity and with what has been happening in the industry and some of the things that Mark is speaking about, the biggest thing that has been lost here is trust. How then does the strategy of clarity then regain or bring back that trust?
Sure, it's the conversations, and I think it's the communication that we have with our stakeholders. And we hope that it can be a simple statement or simple communication rather with our stakeholders, such that we all understand each other's point. I think earlier on I referred to expectations.
Yes.
You know, perhaps being a bit of a gap between them and us, and hopefully these conversations can drive us to basically getting closer and kind of, you know, closing that gap where we can understand what they expect of us as a profession, and also we can understand, hopefully with a more clarity, what it is that they would want us to do as consultants, want us to do as auditors. Yeah.
How important is it to be happening now? You know, because we couldn't have chosen a worse time with what we see, the media, with all the scandals that keep coming up. You know, the deeper, you know, especially at a local level, the deeper the sort of investigations are happening, the more the rot that we see. How important is it that we're doing this clarity charter right now for the industry?
Well, I think, as we said, it's a conversation. It's a start of saying, let's have a conversation so we can get to a point where we understand each other and build that trust that you talk about. So I think it really is a rightful time whilst, you know, the stakeholders are aggrieved and saying, we just don't understand. Let's open up and have the conversations and hopefully get to a point where we all understand each other.
Macfarlane, if I can just come in, I think that there's a really important bit of work that has been done recently by Open Secrets, focusing on the profession. I haven't read the entire document in too much depth, but I think it raises really valid points, and it's points that we've been grappling with over the last couple of years, and I certainly will spend more time looking at it, because there's no doubt that right now, corporate South Africa, man in the street South Africa, has got its eyes focused back on the professional services firms.
With that being said, and with that being done, right, it then raises the question to say, you're opening yourself up to scrutiny. You know, I like what you said earlier on. We're saying we are taking ownership, and with that will come questions. Are you ready? Are you ready for that public scrutiny? Are you ready for all of the eyes, not only from your colleagues, but also from the general public?
I don't suppose one can ever be totally ready for something like that. All I can say, though, is that we will do our best to make sure that we are ready. Who is the measure of our readiness? Our regulator is an important part of our business. We spend a lot of time feeding off what they've given back to us, making sure that our processes change in order to comply with what their expectation is. So I do think that there is an attitude of readiness. I'm not suggesting that we will be faultless, but I think the important thing is that we are ready to make the change that is necessary.
And I think I'll also I'll give both of you an opportunity to perhaps answer this, because I want to have a global view a little bit later on to see what is happening outside of our borders, because it's not like it's been any better there. But the one thing that I also wanted to try and maybe understand here is that, is the industry ready though to introspect? Is the industry ready to take on that admission and say that trust has been lost and it needs to be regained? And I think, you know, I'd like to hear from you, Mark, and then maybe Tito, you give me your, you know, your take on it.
Yeah, Macfarlane, I think all around the world there are similar cases of audit failures, and particularly with large global groups, and none of us are untainted. And I've been party to several meetings, particularly with our EMEA region, where we grapple with this. None of us can afford to have our reputation tarnished. So there is an attitude of compliance, greater introspection, and I think that would be throughout the profession. I've yet to come across a professional who purposely goes out to try and take a shortcut or to make an error. I think by and large the majority of professionals are exactly that. They want to do what is right. And I think the complexity of modern day business does contribute to shortcomings. We're dealing with humans, and there's no doubt that there are some who have contributed to that, possibly knowingly, but I would like to think majority unknowingly.
to talk? Can you weigh in for us there on that one?
Yeah, no, certainly there are conversations that are happening within the profession.
Yes.
And I think, well, as maybe accountants, we're not necessarily trained as such, you know, to really be good communicators, and some of the communication does get lost.
Yes.
In terms of what is happening in the background.
And we can't understand equations, so you could never give it to us as an equation.
No, certainly. Conversations happening, there's a lot. Regulators, we're starting to see some of the regulatory changes as well. Number of conversations happening with the auditor regulator, number of conversations happening. If we look at the stock exchange at the moment, with a number of things coming and the right changes being made. And us, even as a profession, there are a lot of conversations, and as I'm saying, perhaps the gap here is then how then do we actually just tell everybody what type of conversations we are having and be understood.
Something is happening that is quite interesting, and this is out in the United Kingdom. And being a global company, I found it quite interesting that they've come out and said that they're splitting audit from advisory, and I know that's touching you in your studio right there. So, Mark, the split from advisory, and this is something that has been done by the UK regulator. They announced this recently. Will this deal with the issues that are affecting the industry as a whole?
Yeah, Macfarlane, I think firstly this is a real hot off the press. It's just in the last few days that we've been notified that this is likely to happen. And without doubt, the regulator would have had sufficient evidence to suggest that this is contributing towards some of the problems that the profession faces. My understanding is that the firms that it affects at this stage in the UK are the traditional larger firms, and they've been given some guidelines as to how they should achieve this split. They talk about an operational separation.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that the firms have to split into two different organizations. It does talk to the manner in which they are governed, but I think importantly what it talks to is that there should be no cross-subsidization of profits between advisory and audit. And that's my understanding at a high level of what they are trying to achieve. So anything that contributes to an enhancement of audit quality, we will support. And I have no doubt that our colleagues around the world, and particularly in the UK, would support that.
Well, it's happening in the UK. Is it starting to make you nervous in South Africa?
Yeah, certainly, without a doubt. But I mean, we can look at the other side where, I mean, there's been great synergies, I mean, across the two businesses, and particularly when you look at the skill set.
Yes.
In audit, if you are kind of auditing a client that is within healthcare, you could benefit greatly by having an advisor who actually has deep skills within healthcare being part, and perhaps also crossing those skills. So whilst in the conversations, and obviously we want to contribute positively, and we believe then the regulator has done the right homework, there is still some benefits of driving the businesses, I think, somewhat in one house, in a sense of sort of sharing skills and experiences across in order to enhance the value that we kind of put out there for our clients.
That's brilliant. But Mark, this doesn't, and I'm speaking of it from the point of the United Kingdom at a global level, this is not affecting smaller firms like BDO, but the big ones have been asked to maybe look at trying to do this by 2024. How much of an impact will this have on the industry?
Macfarlane, this is not a new conversation. It's something that I think we've been expecting for some years. And certainly our firm in the UK is what we call a challenger firm. It's challenging the bigger firms. And I know that the plans that they've had in place for certainly several years have taken this into account. So I have no doubt that they will roll with the punches, and that they will be able to quickly adapt their business to take into account what the regulator is suggesting. It's only a matter of time before it cascades down to the next layer of firms. And I'd like to think that our firm in particular would be very well prepared for that.
Hopefully, we'll see things bring about some sort of change. With this happening and this announcement being made, it does also shift the gear a little bit in terms of dealing with some of the issues that the profession has. But I find it quite peculiar that they're looking at the big firms, but these are problems that are endemic in the entire industry. So why not have a blanket approach to it and get rid of the problems? I don't see the logic behind it, but maybe there's some sort of strategy that they have.
Yeah, Macfarlane, if I could perhaps come in first. They're starting with the big firms because that's where most of the market is concentrated with regard to the bigger organizations. So it does make sense that by focusing on those particular firms, they would be able to cover a really large part of the market. But you're quite right that the problems go all the way down throughout all the organizations.
Yes.
And that's why I think it becomes best practice for firms to take on board what is being suggested by the regulator.
Do you think it will help in any way?
Volunteering up front as smaller firms and starting the work. Look, I mean, if it's best practice, as we're saying, all we want is, the best outcome for our stakeholders. And we will watch the space and kind of then see the type of conversations and changes that are taking place. And when the time is right, and we'll start to introspect and, perhaps take the necessary steps if required.
I want us to have a look at something, and this is the clarity equation, so that not only for ourselves, but also as we go into our next segment to talk a little bit about this in terms of how it works and what it means. So we're going to have a look at this, and then I think we'll delve a little bit deeper into it so that everybody has an understanding, as well as our live audience that's listening from all over, and hopefully you'll also are able to weigh in the conversation. Send us your questions if there's any polls that you'd like to vote on in terms of the questions that have been put forward already. Let us know. Let's have this conversation. And please, guys, stay in contact with us because we want to get some sort of clarity, right?
Clarity means I speak the truth, even if it's uncomfortable.
It means I'm an honest, direct, and deliberate business partner.
Clarity means I don't hide from facts.
I'm clear about what I know and what I don't.
Today, it's too easy to hide behind vagueness and broadness.
It's too easy to say a lot without saying anything at all.
To be clear means delivering clear thinking, a clear message.
And a clear proposition to our colleagues, our clients,
and even the whole country.
A proposition that says,
we're in this for the long game.
We know that trust is earned by being trustworthy.
And credibility is built by being credible.
So let's be clear. Let's own it, live it, and show it.
We all have an equal part to play.
It's our collective effort that delivers the results.
And it starts with owning my work, my message, and my voice.
It starts with me.
And 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 me.
Well, it is certainly a big step, and I also felt like saying, and me. But fortunately, I don't have to answer to the industry. But that's what it really is all about, isn't it? That everybody needs to, put their foot down and say that I want to be a part of this change. I want to be a part of this charter. I want to be part of this new path that has been taken by BDO. So how do we make sure that staff is a part of the solution going forward?
Macfarlane, I think that we've spoken enough about the conversations that one needs to have.
Yes.
But really, that is what is required. Whether it's at the water point or whether it's in the coffee room when we get there eventually, these are the type of things that we should be talking about all the time, because often our staff look to us as leadership for what they should be doing. And in the surveys that we do from time to time, it's important that the leadership demonstrates exactly what they are trying to achieve through whatever program it is. And this in particular is really important, that we talk to our staff on a regular basis as to what we expect of them, get feedback from them. What do they see us doing? Because if there's a disconnect, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to achieve what we set out to do. So communication, and more communication.
Tutu, how does it trickle down there to each and every single staff member that leaves, conversates with clients, interacts with clients, goes into their businesses, and and making sure that they also understand this message that you're trying to drive? Because these are people involved here, as you said earlier on, Mark. But we need. How do we make sure that that carries out, and this is what what you say is what you do?
I think I touched on earlier on, going back to the basic principles, really, of what drives our business in order to be understood, at least by our stakeholders, by our clients. So the way that I see it really filtering down to our staff is going back to those basics of, I spoke about understanding what the problem statement is, going back to the basics of the project planning. Do we communicate that? Are we clear in terms of our project planning? Are we clear in terms of the outcomes? Are the outcomes measurable and very clear? Do we communicate that clearly with our stakeholders? Do we communicate that clearly as leaders back to our staff? Again, even when we do come out there with recommendations and outcomes to our clients, execution plan that is meant to be done by the client, is it with our help or without our help? If it is to be done by the client, is it clear what they're supposed to do? We often hear about strategies and management letter points being shelved and sitting on clients'
working in
desks.
silos. Yes.
All of those. And often now is then that clarity to say, we talk about this is not a shortcut.
Yes.
It is quite, a lot of communication, a long journey that we want to take with our stakeholders. So making sure that at least they've understood those execution plans. And I think just really going back to those basics, communication to our clients. Do we have the protocols with them? Do they understand ultimately what we'll be delivering on?
That's brilliant. Mark, what are some of the solutions? I mean, we know what the problems are. We know what needs to be done. Where do we start? What are some of those solutions that need to be put into place so that we can start working towards that end goal?
Macfarlane, there's no shortage of policies, codes of conduct, all those type of things.
Which they've always been there.
They've always been there. And that is the absolute basics which we need to comply with. I think this goes beyond that. One can't merely tick the boxes.
Yes.
One needs to fully understand, and sometimes it's in your gut. Is this right or is it not? And we need people to make the right decisions, not for the sake of complying with a code of conduct. It's beyond that we need to exercise that judgment.
Another very important thing that we obviously need to understand is that, the public is not a faceless entity. These are people, it's shareholders, it's business partners, it's organizations. And they're sitting at a place where there was a lot of trust within the industry. And now a lot of work needs to be done to make sure that they now trust the profession. And as much as you are taking the helm, as much as you're spearheading this conversation of clarity, how do they then believe what you're trying to say?
We hope they can believe it through our actions. We say, let's say it right and do it right. Yes. And I think the proof will be in the doing it right as we get to be experienced by our stakeholders. So as we go out to them, they can get a clear message of really what our products are all about and how we deliver on our promises. So I think really the test is in the doing.
When we now start this engagement, there's an entire charter that has been made. I mean, when you read any charter, it's almost like a coat of arms. It's almost as if it's something that has been put in there that we all look up to. Do you think it'll be easily acceptable? Do you think there will be commitment? And if there isn't, what can we put into place to make sure that we all stand by it? I mean, this is not a BDO charter. This is an industry charter that you're putting out there to say, guys, let's try and go back to this.
And Macfarlane, I think that, as I said earlier, we want to start with ourselves. And if anybody out there wants to pick up on it, it would be fantastic.
Yes.
But we've got to do it in small chunks.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no lack of commitment, because if you're in this profession, one understands what is expected of you. I think that you would have heard all the noise that we refer to. And when one considers that the majority of our staff are aiming at becoming chartered accountants or practicing in a regulated field, there is no room for not complying with the standards. And I think that the majority of our people will be totally committed to this campaign. And I would be very surprised if we don't get a big response from today's meeting from our staff, because what I experience with my staff generally is that they are excited to be part of something that's different. They want to make a difference. And I think that we're providing that platform for them right now.
Well, we hope that that platform is one that everybody does try and climb on, and in some way or the other, number one, regain that trust. Number two, clean up the industry, and number three, maybe also bring the profession back to where it was. My question is, where have the regulatory bodies failed? Is it also at some point not a question that we should be asking to them? Because, as you say, there are policies, all of these things are there, but people are just getting a slap on the wrist. I'm looking at you.
It's a good question, and I think.
And I'm obviously not asking you to slam the regulator here, sure. But it's important that we also start asking tough questions about, because when you see somebody have maladministration issues as a result of auditing and et cetera, yet. And they get away with it, because that's a perception that the public has, that millions of taxpayers' money has been lost, especially when we look at our state-owned entities, and it looks like companies are getting away with it.
Yeah, and I think it's a very fair question, Macfarlane, and I don't think the regulators have been sitting back as such, and perhaps we needed to get here for a reset. Like we see today in the world of COVID, things are going well up until there is really a point where you need to reset. And I think this is a great opportunity for us as a profession to kind of then say, well, we've been given an opportunity to do exactly that, reset. We've had things that have been in place for a very long time, and they seemed to have been working, but clearly they're not working effectively and efficiently. And as a result, now we've got to, kind of take the notch up a bit and reset and make things a lot more robust. The world has changed. I mean, you look back, could have been 20 years ago, not everybody could have been in technology, but now every single entity, large, small, you are in technology. So the world has changed, and we've got to change. And we were bound to most probably be where we are. Not necessarily, well, maybe not in the great depths we were hoping, not that way, but let's reflect and reset and do things differently.
That's brilliant, Mark. That basically means taking things back to basics. And how are we going to do that? And when does this begin for BDO as an organization, and hopefully teetering it out to the rest of the industry?
Yeah. So Macfarlane is going back to basics, and sometimes it's just a reminder of the basics, because so often you get caught up in the nitty-gritty of day-to-day work that you do let it slip by. But today is really the reason for the start of that journey. We expect our staff to participate actively, to contribute, and I think that we can make a difference by going back to basics. But perhaps those basics need to change, as you suggested.
Yes.
We operate in an ecosystem which is not just the firms and the clients. The regulators, as you say, are an important part of it. And I think that we all need to have a closer look at what we do in our contribution to making things better.
That's incredible. Guys, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Please don't run away. But we're going to have a bit of a frank conversation. We're going to speak about the industry as a whole. We're going to speak about what has been happening, and also see what steps are going to be taken next in terms of what is going to happen. So please don't go away. We are having this frank conversation, and if you've got any questions, if there's anything that you would like to highlight, if you've perhaps got some questions for any one of our guests or something that you feel that we've not touched on, please do get in contact with us, and let's keep this conversation going and speak frankly. Well, welcome back. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the BDO Clarity session. My name is Macfarlane Moleil. If you're only joining now, if you're just logging in now to find out exactly what we've been doing, we are having a session which speaks to the issue of clarity. There's been many things that have been happening in the industry, and as a result of that, BDO has decided to stand at the helm and say, how do we path the way forward? Earlier on, we were having a chat to Mark as well as Tuto from BDO, and they were ideally telling us what the strategy is all about. They were telling us and giving us some sort of clarity as to exactly where they want to go. There's a charter that has also been put up, and we're hoping that as an industry, everybody can sign on and become a part of this sort of paradigm shift and different way of doing things, and basically going back to the basics. Sounds tough, right? It's actually quite easy, but it can definitely be done. With us now is Freeman Nomvalo. Data, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for the session. He is the CEO of SAICA, and he speaks obviously on behalf of the industry, and he'll be giving us a bit of clarity on the regulations, the impact of pending changes on the broader industry. He was before the CEO of CETA, and he was there for about 2 years. And Data Nomvalo, he also served as the Accountant General of South Africa. There's many other accolades that he has, but these are the ones that we note the most. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
You've had an opportunity to perhaps listen to Mark as well as Tuto when they speak about this issue of clarity, and ideally putting a question forward to the industry as a whole to say, guys, we need to shape up and pull up our socks. And I think from your regulation point of view, what does clarity mean to you? What does this new strategy or position that has been taken by BDO mean to you?
Well, it means that we as regulators as well, SAICA doesn't quite regulate in terms of the legislation. Yes, I think I need to clarify that. The assurance function is regulated by the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors.
Yes.
But SAICA regulates the conduct of its members. Yes. And therefore, it is important that in all of those regulations, we're clear in terms of what we expect the members to comply with. We're clear of where we're taking the profession, and what the consequences of non-compliance by members is.
Why does this matter so much? Why is it so important that this should happen?
It's important because in order for us to improve and to improve the reputation of the profession. In recent years, a number of scandals that unfortunately involved our members have impacted the profession quite negatively.
Yes.
And in order for us to then create a space in which our members are able to understand what is it that is required of them, clarity is important. In order for us to ensure that our members are able to cooperate and work with us in driving that compliance with these good principles, clarity is important. So it is in the best interest of the profession that we are providing a clear message to our members in terms of what we expect, but also in terms of what the consequences would be in the event of misconduct.
You know, and I was obviously speaking to Tuto and Mark earlier on, and I was saying when you have a charter, this is almost, I don't want to say a standard outside of the standards that are already there, but yes, it's something that you commit to, it's something that you look up to, it's like a coat of arms for the industry. Yes. This clarity charter, what sort of impact would you like to see it having, or what sort of impact can it have on the industry as a whole? And could it be used as a benchmark to say that this is what we should be doing, guys? We all know this. Let's just recommit and get back to it.
Yes, and for me, one of the outcomes I would like to see is that where misconduct happens, there are people around. There are members of ours who may get to know of some of those things and the commitment to ensuring that when those are happening, they are uncovered, they are reported. It helps us all to make sure that we act quicker and ensure that those do not happen again. So that commitment from the industry to say we will work with you as regulators, we will work with you as a member body to improve the quality and the competence of our members, but at the same time to make sure that our members are accountable.
It's also a behavioral change.
Yes.
You know, it's one thing to commit to this charter. It's one thing to say that this is how we're supposed to be behaving and what we need to do. But there also has to be a behavioral change. And I think one of the questions that I'd asked earlier on to Tutu was that, you know, the lines get blurred between client, between client and organization. And once those lines start getting blurred, that's when you start having the problem, which means it's a behavioral change that needs to happen.
Well, all our members, when they become members of our profession, they sign up to abide by the Code of Professional Conduct.
Yes.
The very first sentence in the Code of Professional Conduct says that a distinguishing mark of this profession is its acceptance to serve the public interest. So if you are a professional and you wear this designation, CASA, as in South Africa, for instance, we expect you to act in the public interest, first and foremost.
Yes.
And therefore, that behavioral change would be an acknowledgement of the commitment made already.
And when you look at what has been happening in South Africa, because you found that a lot of the rot has been at state-owned entities. You find that there has been those lines once again blurred between roles that were supposed to be in play to have transparency and that sort of thing. Does it mean that there also needs to be an introspection within the industry itself to say, how do we start dealing with government? Because there's nothing that angers the public more than seeing their hard-earned tax getting wasted.
Oh yes, certainly. One of the things that the recent scandals in South Africa has made is that it has resulted in us as SAICA, for instance, thinking quite deeply about this issue. And we've done some work where we are looking at going behind some of these events, understand all of the dynamics that have happened.
Doing an auditing process.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Internal auditing
Internal audit process. Internal audit process. And as a result of that, we are in the process of launching something pretty soon that's going to look into these issues.
Yes.
But before we are able to launch that, last week a report by Open Secrets came out.
Yes.
And it's not flattering to the profession, but it's raising questions around those times when the lines are blurred. And they raise a question that I think the profession has got to engage with, which is about what the FRC is already doing in the UK, to think about how the assurance function as well as advisory services create that possibility of blurring of lines.
Yes.
Now, if you are doing an assurance function, you're supposed to serve the public interest. If you're serving a client as an advisor, your interest is that of the client. And therefore, the question that is arising out of the Open Secrets report, I think fairly, is whether when you've got these two roles in one organization, does it bring that possibility that as you deal with an issue, you become less worried about your public interest role, primarily because you can secure the other bigger interest?
Yes.
And it's a question that I think the firms and the profession has got to deal with. 2 years ago, in the UK, the FRC issued a report, and when you look at that report, 80% of the fees that the Big Four is receiving comes from advisory services. And therefore, whether we like it or we don't like it as a profession, it does raise that question in the eyes of those that are watching. So that conversation has got to take place, and we've got to clarify some of those issues.
Internally, as an industry, what conversations are being had by your members in dealing with some of these things? Mark earlier on said that there are codes of conduct, there are policies that have been put into place.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what it is that they're supposed to do. Why then are we finding so many, so many of these investigations revealing that there is something wrong?
You see, first, I think, without being defensive,
yes,
the times when these instances are fewer, the impact they have is massive.
yes.
And therefore, the noise that then suggests that this is prevalent is understandable. But quite frankly, there's a fewer instances where these unbecoming events are occurring compared to the majority of the cases.
Yes.
But what is important is what we do when we find out that this is happening. Now, unfortunately, the minute something is gone wrong already and you've got to deal with it through a retributive process,
Yes.
it takes long. It takes time because you've got to build your case properly, you've got to prosecute that case, you've got to be fair to the other individual, and all of those things. If you are to do it and do it effectively, you've got to have to be patient and take all of the steps that are necessary to do so.
But I'm sure this Clarity Charter will hopefully make that easier, won't it?
Oh yes, if it leads to also the cooperation with the regulators, yes indeed.
Dr. Freeman, thank you so much. That was Freeman Nombalo, and he's the SAICA CEO, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, giving us a bit of a side from a regulatory point of view as to exactly what is going to happen and what this charter means for the industry. We're going to go into the most interesting part of this conversation now, and that's where we get our audience participation. Everyone, close to 700 of you, thank you so much, guys. 700 of you have joined us this afternoon, have been taking part in this conversation. So what are we going to do now is that we're going to have a chat, have a look at some of those questions that you have, perhaps for Mark, as well as Tuto, just so that we can see and find out what clarity is all about. You haven't understood anything. If if there's a couple of questions that you would like to pose, we really do appreciate it, and we will interact with you. We've also got the top question. We've got a top question that was asked by one of our viewers, and I'm going to go straight into that. And thank you very much for that question. This question got 43 votes, right? And I think Mark and Tuto can see it. And so, Mark, I'm going to ask, why do you think that the audit profession has got to this point where massive fraud and misstatements of information occur in the clients being audited and are not picked up by the auditors? It's a deep question. It's a really, really strong question. But I think we can maybe be able to unravel it.
Yeah. Macfarlane, look, to answer the question without sounding defensive is going to be really difficult. But, the complexity of business compared to when some of the standards were written has changed so much.
Yes.
And when one considers that auditors are not part of management, and the time that they spend with a client is largely understanding what the client's business is about, the processes that they apply, and also to an extent judging the reliability of what is being told to them by management. So if one thinks of some of the failures that have happened around the world, many geographies, sometimes different audit firms, not necessarily the same audit firm. So I'm not sure that the audit profession has necessarily kept up with the complexity of business in order to prevent these type of failures taking place. So I think that there are probably much deeper answers to that question, but that to me is one of the issues that we need to consider.
There's another question. This one got about 26 votes. And I'm going to give this to you, Tuto. Is it up to a mid-tier firm like BDO to take this proactive approach? No. What about the Big Four? Have you included them in this discussion? I think we can take 2 stabs at that one. Tuto?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think all of us have got to take participation in the professional conversations, especially if we want to move to a point where we correct ourselves. So it's not up to the Big Four, but it's up to every one of us in the profession. So maybe just to clarify from there, I do think, you know, a mid-tier firm like BDO is doing the right thing because it is really up to all of us. Then the second part of the question
was what about the Big Four?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, certainly we're starting a conversation, and we hoped to get to a conversation that we can broaden it to everybody. And I certainly, I have no doubt that they are not having the conversations. You know, there might be conversations out there, but we would like to, at least with clarity, include them.
Mark, from your side, there's another question that has come through. This one got about 19 votes. What does clarity mean for your culture as a firm, and is it an implementable approach?
Yeah, so I suppose it would be worthwhile just to spend a little bit of time about our culture, and we are a values-driven organization, and we put a lot of emphasis on values. Culture and values go very much hand in hand. Our culture is one of support of each other. It's one of transparency, being open door, and I don't think that this is likely to be a cultural shock to our organization. It's something that we try and live every day of our lives at work. So is it implementable from a cultural point of view? I have no doubt that it is. We spend a lot of time in recruiting the type of people we want to our organization to ensure that there's a cultural alignment. And as I say, I have no doubt that we'll be able to implement this with the support of our people.
1,000 or 1,500 of them, right?
Absolutely. I try to look at the positive side of it, and that there are no bad apples in amongst that lot.
Yes.
But of course, we've got to be on our guard because society changes. And we need to ensure that those who are not aligned to our culture are found out, and that we either get them aligned or they find an alternative path in their careers.
That's brilliant. Do you believe that splitting auditing and advisory from each other will actually work? And once again, that's got to be yours.
Macfarlane, I think I mean, the comment that Mark made earlier on, these are really, really hot off the press, at least from the UK perspective. And I think all of us are going to watch keenly to see if it really works. But as I said, from where I stand, I think the conversations and point of clarity is understanding exactly the expectation gap and trying to close that. And we'll move closer to our stakeholders and clients. Whether we should split advisory and auditing, I did say I see more value from where I stand in terms of how we leverage off each other from a skills perspective.
Yes.
And perhaps whether the fees is a key driver for that conversation we can definitely have.
Well, somebody says, show me the money. Advisory is where the money is, so why even go after the audits? Why not leave it to the Big Four?
Yeah, I think one needs to examine the roots of our firm, and it's very much in the audit space. So for us to commit to building a huge advisory business would mean a real about turn in terms of strategy. And I don't think that we are ready for that yet. We have a very loyal client base. We have a niche in the market in certain sectors. And I think that we are comfortable operating in the audit space related to that. Funny enough, I don't know that the Big Four are any more enthusiastic about audit than we might be.
Yeah.
But for us, it has been our bread and butter for many years, and I don't see us walking away from that too soon.
Cool. In a time when business is tough, how do you encourage your teams to address irregularities with big clients?
Please can I answer this?
Oh, you itching. That's yours. Take it away.
You know, when I was a young partner, one of the wiser partners said to me, there's just one thing you must remember. Bad news doesn't get better with time. In other words, raise the bad news when it occurs. And I think that that's really the point of that question is when one becomes aware that something has gone wrong, that is when you need to raise the irregularity. There's no amount of money that can buy your reputation back when you've lost it. And I think that if we can get that message through to our staff, it becomes that much more easier. Don't worry about the financial aspect of it when your reputation is at stake.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what pays my bills. Hey, then we're having a different conversation in a different studio.
Yeah, with me in an orange overall.
Another very interesting one is how much clout does BDO have when it comes to affecting change in the profession? I mean, we've just had Mr. Freeman Nomvalo here speaking about how great this is and how important it is for now for the entire industry and your colleagues to start having that sort of introspection. But I think the question really is how do you now communicate this message to everyone else?
As we said, let's start the conversation. And for me, I believe we are the right people to start the conversation. There is no specific person that's right. Mm-hmm. We are starting the conversation, and we hope we can continue being clear and carry on with the conversation with the rest of the profession.
Okay. A little birdie, right, asked me to have a look at what is happening in the Financial Mail. You were quoted as saying rules could be put in place preventing firms from auditing and consulting to the same companies. It has to be very clearly defined and legislated. Do you think this will really work?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that there is an element of greyness as to the work of audit and advisory for the same client. I think that if it was regulated to the point where if you have an audit client, we may not do any advisory work. It would send out a very clear message. And I think that that's probably what we need. We have it in the listed company space, but I think it probably needs to go further down. I'm not sure where the cutoff is, because naturally as one gets lower down the pecking order of clients, they rely on their professional service advisors for more advice. And I don't know that we should totally do away with that, but there has to be a cut-off point at which point no advisory work can be done for an audited client.
Brilliant. Jojo, any closing remarks? Is there any words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with, or just to maybe round off everything that we've gone through and this incredible session that we've had? I mean, I feel so much more smarter after having had this conversation with you guys.
Well, thanks for having us this afternoon, Macfarlane. I think, in closing for me is let's continue the conversations. Let's continue to be clear. Let's continue to be understood as a profession, and hope to then bring our stakeholders much closer than where we are at the moment.
And from you, Mark, perhaps?
Yeah, Macfarlane, thanks. It's been a great conversation. I think that if we can just be the start of something which impacts on not only our firm but the profession, that would be fantastic. I think that it's fair to say that we would like to see quality as a differentiator from a business point of view.
Yes.
And I think that we can achieve that. It's certainly not an overnight exercise, but I'd like to encourage our staff to join us on that journey. We are part of a global organization. We need to ensure that our contribution to the global professional world is something that we can be proud of. And I'm very pleased that Keith Farling, our global CEO, who we were hoping to have with us today, who's watching this from Canada, that he is equally proud of what we've started today. And I know that he takes the BDO network very seriously, takes us to task every now and again when we don't live what we set out to do. And I hope, Keith, that you're proud of the South African firm for what we're doing.
Well, thank you very much to the both of you. You've made this a really, really pleasant experience for me. And thank you to the more than 700 people that came online and were part of this journey for us as we started this conversation about clarity. There's going to be plenty more of these conversations that we're going to have. This was only the beginning as an introduction to everyone so that they can see how this path is going to be charted forward. Please do keep the conversation going. Hashtag BDO Clarity Charter. Keep the conversation going on social media and the various other channels that are available. As I said, this is a series of events that are going to be held around this strategy of clarity, and hopefully the end in mind is for an introspection of the industry, a paradigm shift within the industry, and perhaps the most important one, regaining the trust of not only the public, but the industry and also each and every single individual that holds the mantle high of being a part of this incredible industry. So thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Remember, guys, keep safe, sanitize. We need to spread love, not disease.